My name's David Deans. I am one of the +1 coaches. Shout out to Group 9, my group that we meet in the breakout every week as part of this larger coaching group led by Chris. I'm a United Methodist pastor, but I've stepped away from my church at the end of 2022 and took early retirement due to the issues in the United Methodist Church, but also in part because I really wanted to focus more and more on disciple making. So it's been an exciting journey for me. I'm part of a growing group of disciple making movement practitioners and catalysts here in Maryland, where I live. And some of that group are here on this call with us. Together, we're working to multiply disciples across the whole DMV, kind of the DC, Maryland, Virginia area. And God's doing some awesome stuff there. I was at Oakdale Church with Kevin Baker back in 2019 when we first stumbled upon DMM, and then were trained subsequently by Chris Galanis. Kevin shared some of that story a few weeks ago when he shared as one of the +1 coaches here on this call as well. I'm also leading a DMM group in Africa that started in Kenya during COVID. Some of you have heard that story. The update is just incredible what God's been doing. It has expanded rapidly, not only in Kenya, but now into Uganda, Burundi, Tanzania, and the Congo. So praise God for that. I'm definitely over my head with all of that God is doing. And I'm probably more of the Barnabas to the Pauls that are really running that. But I try to help out as best I can and to kind of be a part of some of the leadership with that. But God's doing some amazing things. Well, today I kind of want to share a few things that I've learned, or should I say discovered along the way. I don't think any of this will be anything brand new for any of you. It's stuff that we've probably heard. You've probably heard as part of the coaching here on the Wednesday coaching group. But these are things that I've heard, but now I've experienced them, and I can affirm the truth and the validity of some of these things in my disciple making practices. And so a couple of those things here. The first one is this, that a life totally surrendered to and focused on God is the foundation of disciple making. Right? We know this, there's no movement without God, without the Holy Spirit. Jesus told us in John 15:5 that without an abiding relationship with Jesus, without an abiding relationship with him, that we can do nothing. And so I'm realizing that, I'm experiencing that more and more, that I need God. I need the Holy Spirit and everything that I'm doing. This disciple making movement stuff has humbled me probably more than anything else in my ministry career of 25 years. It's put me on my knees. I'm praying more than I've ever prayed. I still remember the first challenge in the DMM training about extraordinary prayer, and just from there, my prayer time, my prayer life alone and with corporately has just continued to grow, and praying for the lost community, and just praying for people to receive, to be open to spiritual conversation, and to want to be interested in doing a discovery group. All of that has forced me on my knees and praying more and more. So I just realized I have so far to go. Have you ever noticed the more time you spend getting closer to God, the more you realize how much further away you are, how much further you have to go? The more you get to know God, the bigger you realize how big God is and how far from him you still are. So I'm still growing in that, but I'm trusting God more and more, including for a job and a salary these days. When I stepped away from my denomination in church last year, I stepped away from a salary. So thankfully, my wife is a veterinarian and helping to support our family. And then I'm doing some other little things here and there to help make a little money, but a lot of my time is focused on disciple making and not getting paid for that. But it's my passion and what I love to still do. A friend recently gave me a book entitled Letters of a Modern Mystic by Frank Laubach, I think how you pronounce his name. I don't know if any of you all know the book. It looks like this. It's a tiny little book. And Frank, the author, was a missionary in the 1930s, serving on the island of Mindanao in the Philippines. And so the book is a compilation of letters that Frank wrote to his father over those missionary years. And the letters tell of Frank's spiritual journey as he embarks on an experiment to live in a conscious moment by moment communion with God. And along the way, Frank discovers that an ever increasing communion with God also leads to greater missionary effectiveness. I wanted to read a quote to you here. You know, when you do DMM, everything that when you come across other things that kind of highlight disciple making or something that will help with something that sounds familiar to DMM, it always, you know, it gets highlighted for me in my mind when I read these things. So this is the quotes. He's talking about as he's been communing more and more with God, just how the world around him reacts. And so he says, take Lanao and the Moros for illustration. Their responsiveness is to me a continuous source of amazement. I do nothing that I can see except to pray for them and to walk among them thinking of God. They know I'm a Protestant, yet 2 of the leading Muslim priests have gone around the province telling everybody that I would help the people to know God. He says, I walk out, this is kind of fast forwarding a couple more pages. He says, I walk out into the street full of Moros, and if my soul is as full of God as it sometimes is, I see what happens as I look into their eyes and pray for them. No man need to try to persuade me that God does not reach them, for I see the thing happen. And now I know that every person we ever meet is God's opportunity, if only we were not so much of the time shut off from God. So just a reminder of how much we need God, and just focusing on our time with God can sometimes open doors with other people and disciple making more than anything else. Like I think our number one work is focusing on God and prayer and those things, building that relationship. And then that opens the door for a lot of these other disciple making opportunities. And kind of number 2 on the heels of that is right, continue to pray and let the Spirit lead you. Jesus said in Matthew 28, all authority on heaven and on earth has been given to me. Therefore, go and make disciples. So therefore, let us be bold in going out to make disciples. Trust that God is preparing people. As Frank Laubach said, that every person we ever meet is God's opportunity, right? If we're being led by the Spirit of God. Isaiah 30, verses 20 to 21 says, the Lord will be with you. Your own ears will hear him. Right behind you, a voice will say, this is the way you should go, whether to the right or to the left, end quote. And I've had those moments where I feel the Spirit speaking to say, go down this street, go talk to that person. In fact, not too long ago, there's a community in my neighborhood that I drive by often. And I started feeling like God was saying, go to that community, but I didn't obey. But God kept persisting. Every time I drive by, hey, go to that community, drive in there, go walk through there. And one day I had more time on my hands, and I said, okay, Lord, I'm gonna obey. And I went to pull into this community, and the Lord said, not this road, this one. And so I finally turned up the one that he told me. And then I was looking for parking, couldn't find parking. I was going to turn off somewhere. And the Lord kept saying, I kept hearing the Lord say, no, go straight, keep going, keep going. So I kind of stayed straight. I went to the very back of this community, still didn't find parking. And there was kind of the end of the community. I had to kind of do a U-turn. And as I'm turning around, I see a man coming out of his condo or his townhome, going to his car. And I thought, well, he's getting ready to leave. But as I got turned around and kind of got closer to where he was just putting something in his car and then going back to his door, to his home. And I heard the Lord say, that man. And so I rolled down my window and I said, hey, is there any parking around here where I can park? And he was explaining where I could go park. And I said, well, that's great. I said, well, the other thing I'm here is I just felt like the Lord calling me to this community to come pray for people. And his head just went down like that. And he said, I think you've come for me. And so then and there, he explained what was going on with his family and some things with his daughter. And we got to pray, got to share a Bible story with him. And so, and from that community has just opened up all kinds of other communities. But that was the first man that I met and really felt strongly that the Lord saying, go into that community. So let the Spirit speak to you, keep praying, and let the Spirit lead you, and be bold, because Jesus has all authority on heaven and on earth. The next one is be yourself, be genuine, be friendly. Sometimes it takes a little while to kind of get comfortable doing this. And if you've never done this before, you could be a little awkward. And I'm sure I was. I'm sure I'm still learning. But what I found is, as I've gone and talked to people and tried some different approaches or tweaked some different things, as I've seen how people respond or don't respond as well, is just to try to relax and have fun with it, right? I mean, sometimes I think I've gone out there and I was too formal or right away too spiritual. And what I found, at least in my context with working with people, is just kind of act like you might normally act if you saw somebody you wanted to say hi to, and that, especially, if you're in that community and they're, act like they're a neighbor. Hey, how you doing? Have we had a chance to meet? And just talk to people, chit chat a little bit, some small talk, and see what God does. Sometimes I can tell right away by doing that, hey, they're really busy, they're not open to conversation, and I can just bless them and move on. But if the conversation begins to go well, I can begin moving that into spiritual conversation. And so, have fun when you're out there. I mean, I'm somebody who loves meeting new people, and people, I think, are the most interesting things on the planet. And so, people are unique and different, and just the opportunity to interact with different kinds of people, some that I've maybe never would have interacted with, otherwise, except for I'm intentionally going out to their community. And then God's helping me to meet all kinds of great people. So have fun with it. Let Jesus shine through you as you're out there, just trying to relax and be yourself, be genuine. People can tell when you're not genuine, when you're being inauthentic. So just be genuine, be yourself, have fun, let the light of Jesus shine through. 2 Corinthians 2:15 says, for we are to God the sweet aroma of Christ among those who are being saved. So, be the sweet aroma of Christ. Some of these communities I've gone into, neighbors sometimes don't even talk to each other. A lot of the communities, neighbors don't talk to each other, especially to come pray for them. So, realize that you're the sweet aroma of Christ. You're bringing a joy and a peace of God to that place that maybe others aren't, often aren't. And so, go in the authority of Jesus and go knowing that God's going to use you, but have fun doing it. And if people seem open, to you, then begin to take the conversation deeper spiritually. And that some of the 4 quadrants model, that's been really helpful, kind of the casual to meaningful to spiritual to discovery. And so I found that really helpful. There are times sometimes where I do feel like I've got to jump right in spiritually, but most often what I've found, at least in my context, that seems to work well is the casual, meaningful. Then if they open, I'm spiritual. And then if they continue to be open to that, asking them about discovery. Number 4, regularity breeds familiarity. Now, most people, at least where I'm from, are weary of strangers, especially if you look different from most of the people in the community where you might be prayer walking or serving. In one apartment complex that we went to recently, people thought we were the undercover police or FBI. We were definitely looked different than most people in that community. And a murder had just taken place. And so people thought we were there to kind of find incriminating evidence, I guess, on neighbors or something. I don't know. In fact, we couldn't even, we were excited to be there, and we were trying to go up to talk to people. And I remember there was this one group of people, about 12 people, and they saw us coming, and like most of the group, before we got close enough, just kind of ran away. And then we found out later, they're like, oh yeah, they thought you guys were like undercover police, and I didn't want to talk to you at all. So, but as you keep going back to the same places, the same times each week, people began to realize, oh, okay, they're not total strangers. We've seen them before. So you begin to kind of move from stranger, right, unknown, people are weary about you, to someone they're used to seeing. And hopefully then maybe as you talk to them, or they talk to you a little bit, then you become an acquaintance, and then hopefully maybe even a friend, and ultimately hopefully maybe even a disciple making mentor. But regularity breeds that kind of familiarity. And so keep going back to the same places. And in fact, regularity can turn a no into a yes. There was one guy that we did actually get to talk to that day when we first went, when they all thought we were undercover police. We ended up talking with a guy, and he seemed interested at first. And then he told me, later through some text, no, I don't want to meet with you. I'm not going to do it. I don't have time. So I couldn't believe it. It seemed like at first he was so open, and then he didn't want to at all. So we showed up anyways. We're just going to continue walking that community and praying for that community and meeting people. So we showed up anyways. But when we showed up, he saw us. He was in his car, and he said, I saw you, and I couldn't believe that you came back again. And he said, God told me, you need to go talk to that man. That man has something for you to hear. And he said, I was getting ready to go into that apartment over there and go drinking with all my buddies. And by this time I would have been, pretty gone. He said, but God told me to go meet with you because I saw you there, and I couldn't believe you came back. So sometimes even that going back can turn a no into a yes. And we got to meet and had a great DBS. All right. 1 Corinthians 15:58 says, therefore, my dear brothers and sisters, stand firm. Let nothing move you. Always give yourselves fully to the work of the Lord, because you know that your labor in the Lord is not in vain, right? So that regularity, that persistence, keep going back. It's not in vain. The more consistently and frequently that you visit someplace, the sooner you get to know the people, right? And they get to know you, and hopefully sooner or later, the faster you'll be accepted. All right, the next, number 5, to see a movement catalyze, you must build teams and networks. You must build teams and networks. Luke 10:2 says, Jesus said, ask the Lord of the harvest to send out workers into his harvest field. Well, here's the thing I've learned. Though the Lord is in charge of sending out workers, I believe the Lord wants to use us to help organize those workers. John Wesley wasn't the most charismatic preacher. He wasn't as charismatic as somebody like, George Whitefield. But what made Wesley so special was his ability to organize people and kind of bring people together into groups and communities. In fact, that's what helped catalyze the Methodist movement that we all know about. So don't forget to cast vision. Right? Part of organizing groups is first casting vision. You've got to be regularly raising that sail, casting vision to on fire believers, cast a wide net. And one of the ways that I've done that is that I found helpful is in my own community, especially once I kind of retired, took that early retirement, and I'm not a pastor of a local church per se. I've just started trying to join the other churches and pastors and what they're doing. So I've tried to find out, what are the pastors in my own community, doing? What are they trying to do for the community? What prayer groups do they have? What pastors groups do they have? What special outreaches and maybe worship nights do they have? In fact, tonight's is a local kind of a rotating prayer night, and I'm going to go join that. And so in joining what the current churches and pastors are already doing in my neighborhood, I'm seeing God at work through them and what they're doing, but they also realize that I'm there to support them, and I'm there to try to help them, versus me trying to come in and say, hey, let me tell you how you should be doing it. Have you, let me tell you about disciple making movements. And if I try to do that right away, sometimes it's, they don't hear me as well. But if I'm a part of what they're already doing, and then I just talk about disciple making, because that's just who I am as I'm out there and just talking to people and working with people. I'm just talking about disciple making and what I've learned along the way. And as I do that, they become more and more interested. I'm casting vision, right? And especially to the on fire ones, and then I'm able to find people who God wants to raise up, and people who are open and interested. So that's worked well here in my community where I live. I've trained several of the pastors in the area and church leaders, and I think God's doing something special here in Damascus where I live. Let's see what else. So once they're interested, right, you've got to train them. So train them, get them into the DMM training that we've all done. And then after that, create the ongoing coaching groups. I think sometimes we forget that these, part of the organizing people is not just training them, but then organizing those after the training. Hopefully you've got one or two or maybe more that want to continue practicing. You've got to organize those people and build your team. So create the ongoing coaching groups for those you've trained and who are ready and willing to keep raising the DMM sales, and then create ongoing coaching groups for people that are leading discovery groups. So as you've met people out in the communities that are leading discovery groups, don't forget to coach them and create groups around those people. Maybe at first you only have one or two and you can meet them separately, but as you get more and more discovery groups going, more and more DBSs going, you can begin to put those people into a group and coach them together if they're able and willing. So that's another group. And a third group that you want to organize is just other DMM practitioners that you didn't even know about, people that you didn't train, people that maybe you didn't know originally, but as we've been praying, Lord, connect us. And, we want to build teams. And, we've got this vision for the whole DMV area, Lord. As we've been doing that, God's been bringing people to us that we didn't even know about. As far away as there's DMM practitioners in West Virginia even, and God's just been connecting us across the counties in Maryland and across Virginia, DC, West Virginia even. And so we want to try to how do you begin to organize those people so that they begin to know everybody else in this growing network? So we've been trying to do that. We're at some of us here on this call have created something we've called DC Underground, and it's this growing network in the DMV area that we're trying to pull all these people in, and out of that we're doing the ongoing coaching groups and different ways to organize people that way. So keep praying for that. That's a brand new project that's just getting off the ground, this DC Underground, but you can look that up online and check it out, kind of what we're doing there. All right, number 6, practice what you preach, right? This took me a while to really get into the rhythm of, what I've learned. At the beginning for me, it was kind of spurts and, spits and spats and spurts of trying to be able to practice this. I'd start practicing and then I'd get busy, or something with the local church would happen and I'd get distracted, family matters, or just maybe wasn't being obedient. And so it was kind of, on and off, disciple making, practicing my DMM, raising my sales, but, keep coming back to the coaching groups, stay in your breakout groups, be encouraged by the others in your group. And as one of us would have some success in kind of living out those DMM habits, that would encourage others of us. And so I was encouraged by hearing many of your all stories and in my own group as well. And to the point that I'm not perfect by no means, but I'm practicing the DMM, the 7 sales and going out to the loss. I'm practicing that regularly. And I think that's important. Matthew 5:16 says, in the same way, let your light shine before others so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father who is in heaven. We've got to model what we're training others to do. The more I was training people and connecting with people and people who seemed open to wanting to know more about disciple making, I had opportunities for more and more of these trainings, but I realized as I was doing that, well, I need to make sure I'm modeling this practice. I need to practice what I'm preaching. And that helped with me getting more consistent in my raising the sales. I think that gives us more credibility and legitimacy, right? I could be telling people, especially these other pastors or Christian leaders in the community, about all this disciple making, but if I'm not doing it, or if I'm not having fruit from it even, or stories to share, then they're going to be like, okay, yeah, come back and tell us again. We've got a lot of work. Church is busy enough. Come back and tell us when you've got some success, when you've got some fruit and stories to share. And so practicing it myself has given me stories, and I think credibility and legitimacy. And then it gives me opportunities to invite people to join me, as they're interested. Hey, come join me on this prayer walk. Hey, come meet this person I was telling you about last week in the training. So that's been helpful. And it helps us with, again, casting vision and inviting people, because you've got your own stories to share. And then number 7, and I've got only one more after that, but number 7 is I think my favorite. God's grace can turn setbacks to comebacks. God's grace can turn setbacks to comebacks. What we think are failures or setbacks can actually be next level progress in the economy of God. That's just how God works. I mean, take the cross, right, as the biggest example. Take the disciples, the early disciples who fled Jerusalem during that persecution after Jesus was crucified. Acts 8 verses 1b and verse 4 says this: a great wave of persecution began that day, sweeping over the church in Jerusalem. And all the believers, except the apostles, were scattered through the regions of Judea and Samaria. But the believers who were scattered preached the good news about Jesus wherever they went. Sometimes when we have these setbacks, God uses those setbacks to really expand the kingdom, to really expand the disciple-making opportunities. So trust God through even those what you think are failures and setbacks. Just one example in Africa. We started the ministry there with one guy in one village in Kenya, and it spread to several groups pretty rapidly, and we thought things were going great. And all of a sudden, there was a lot of political unrest, and famine started happening in Kenya. Some of the political unrest was causing violence, and a lot of our groups had to break up. They were, one of our main leaders, Sam. One of our main leaders there, in fact, had to move his whole family because he was afraid that they would get hurt there where they were living in Western Kenya. And so when he left, it changed a lot of the dynamics of what was going on. And we're thinking, and then of course the famine came and people had to move to find food and to find work. And they're still recovering from kind of the post-COVID. So there was a lot of that going on. And we thought, after those initial great things were happening, then all of a sudden things were just breaking up. Groups were breaking up and people were leaving, and we thought, oh no, this is falling apart. But God used that because the initial DMM DNA, we taught those leaders and they taught others that DNA right away. When those people left, they often went back to other places in Kenya, other side of Kenya, which is huge, other countries. And when they went, many of them started DBSs, started discovery groups where they went. And so what we thought was a failure, God ended up using to spread disciple making across Kenya and eventually to all of those other countries that I've mentioned. It's just incredible what God's doing there. It continues to be miraculous for sure. And then in just an example here in my own community, we started in one community, the community I was telling you about, where I felt like the Lord saying, take this road. That's the man you talk to. Well, since like May, we've been in that community, maybe the end of April. I think it was actually early May. We've been walking that community. And then like the middle of June, schools got out. And we had all of these rhythms of teenagers we were meeting. We were playing basketball with teenagers, and parents were out with their kids around some of the outdoor common areas. And so we had all these regular routines of who we were meeting and talking to. But then as soon as school got out, everything changed. Like everybody's schedules were different, and we'd come at the same time and nobody was out. It was like, really, the school schedule really, made that big of a difference? Well, yeah, it did. And so what we started to do then is we went down to the next community, and that was the community where the murder was. And that's just opened up a whole nother community with even more Pipsy people. I think people that are even more open to the spiritual conversation. And it's been incredible what God's doing there. So again, sometimes what we think is a failure or a setback, God can turn into a comeback in many ways. And then even my own denomination, I think as the UMC is splitting and churches are leaving, they're saying by the end of this year, of 2023, that just in the United States, over 7,000 churches will have left the UMC. And many of those churches, I'm hoping are if not all of them, are going to be able to refocus on disciple making and refocus on what God's calling them to do, the mission, not just the institution, but the mission. And hopefully those will continue to find success in disciple making in some new ways. And, for many of us, Kevin, me, some others that are Methodist, this split has given me opportunities now to refocus on disciple making. And I'm sure Kevin could say the same, and others. So again, God's grace can turn setbacks to comebacks. Lastly, don't give up. Another book I was reading this summer when I went to the beach for a couple of days was called The Flourishing Pastor by Tom Nelson. And he says this, I don't think he coined this phrase, we've all probably heard it before, but he talks about long obedience in the same direction. And just reading that, hearing that again, just kind of reminded me, this is the long game we're playing. We're not, I think in America, we're used to, in Western civilization, maybe we're just kind of used to, fast food, instant success, instant fruit. And God's really looking at the long game. And so we've got to be willing that long obedience in the same direction. Even when we don't see maybe the fruit we want to see right away, you just keep being obedient, right? That's the only thing that we can measure is our obedience. The fruit is up to God. So just keep practicing the DMM principles, keep raising the sails, keep going to the same places, keep listening to the Spirit, be consistent, in the power and the help of God. And I believe eventually you'll start seeing the fruit that you've been praying for and hoping for. Galatians 6:9 says, so let's not get tired of doing what is good. At just the right time, we will reap a harvest of blessing if we don't give up. So friends, don't give up.